In our past 1 to 15 lessons on the essence on the Dharma practices of Tibetan Buddhism, we have discussed a lot on the continuing existence of life after death, and some general knowledge on how the post-death world works, so we know what important points we need to take notice of in our Dharma practice and the key points of an relationship between the existence of life after death and Dharma practice. These subjects have all been explained to you. So what do we talk about starting from the 16th lesson, that is after we have listened to the past 15 lectures? We know that life goes on even after we die. How are we going to deal with these problems? The answer is we need to learn how to enhance the strengths and abilities of our mind, which can really help us, instead of relying solely on others to help ye by releasing souls from purgatory or reciting mantras, because that is temporary help that won't last long and is not effective enough. It is like when you're really poor. Some people give you money to help you, or give you some free meals, or help you for a short period of time, but in the long term, you have to help yourself by developing certain abilities, which can really help you. That means we must have Dharma practice. Among the methods for Dharma practice, what is the first most important and fundamental step? It is the mind training. Mind training is the prerequisite for success in any Dharma practice. I will teach you what is mind training in today's lesson. What is the foundation of mind training? Now I will ask you several questions. You need to raise your hand or answer the questions I raise. The first question I have for you is, what is the foundation of mind training? Is no anger the foundation of mind training? Please raise your hand if you think so. Only 4 or 5 of you raised hands, too few. Before I give the answer, I have another question. Is mind training a kind of visualization in nature? Do we need visualization? Please raise your hand if you think that is right. More people raise their hands but still not many. Is mind training a kind of tolerance? Does it mean to have more tolerance? More people think so than the last time with visualization. Thank you. Is that 6 parameters and 10,000 behaviors a foundation of mind training? Let me first explain what are the 6 parameters in simple terms. The 6 parameters refer to almsgiving, observance of precepts, forbearance, diligence, meditation and wisdom. Please raise your hand if you think it is right. Even more people than the last time. These people all understand Buddhist Dharma. I will give further explanation later. Actually, being angry or not is a kind of surface behavior. A person showing anger does not represent one's inner heart, so you can see some of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, especially in Vajrayana Buddhism, are presented as wrathful deities, having very fierce look, but in their minds, they have a heart of intrinsic nature and intrinsic nature. Their minds are in a pure natural state. There is no greed, anger and ignorance in their minds, although they look fierce or angry on the outside. It doesn't mean they are like that in their inner hearts. Perhaps some people would use anger to achieve certain goals, but what they are thinking inside their minds, we can't see clearly, whether they have some kindness in mind or just full of greed, anger and ignorance. We can't know that from the external appearance because showing no anger is just a surface behavior. But why do some of us think that this could mean mind training? Because we think that if my mind has been well trained, it equals to good temper and I don't get angry easily. This is a misunderstanding. Therefore, good temper can't be regarded as the foundation of mind training. Whether visualization is a method for mind training. Is it the foundation of mind training? It depends on whether the content of visualization involves anything related to the foundation of mind training. If so, then it is. If not, then it isn't. Then is it about tolerance? Is more tolerance means mind training? It is also just a behavior on the outside, whether you can be tolerant or not. I may tolerate you at first but seek revenge late. This kind of tolerance is no longer the foundation of mind training. Some people with better mind training have more tolerance. because this is only a kind of surface behavior which does not represent the inside mind. That is why it is not the real foundation of mind training. In terms of the 10,000 behaviors, it means that we can do thousands of things to help and save others, but it doesn't mean that these behaviors represent our inner heart. For instance, I have done lots of good things, but the aim is to achieve other goals, so these behaviors are not the foundation of mind training. As for 6 parameters, how do we think of 6 parameters? 6 parameters actually contain some training on the nature of the mind. When the Guru Master, who imparts Buddhist Dharma, teaches you 6 parameters, and gives you some training which contains mind training, it is counted as the foundation of mind training. On the face of it, almsgiving is a surface behavior. It is the same as no anger, as I have just explained. But there is certain standard on 6 parameters. According to the Buddhist Dharma, there is a requirement of almsgiving in the Buddhist Dharma to distinguish the real offerings. As explained in details in the Lord Buddha's scriptures, it is divided into 3 levels of inner, outer and secret. It can only be regarded as real mind training when the requirements are met. That is why we rule that almsgiving belongs to the foundation of mind training. Although on the face of it, almsgiving is only a behavioral act. As for observance of precepts, it is a yardstick or a standard to assist you in mind training. It can be regarded as a kind of training which will let you know what can be counted as the foundation of mind training. Tolerance and diligence in our Buddhist Dharma, if you can meet their requirements, they be counted as the foundation of mind training. Meditation is a way to help mind training. Today I want to focus on wisdom. How can we use wisdom to lay the foundation for mind training? That is our first step in learning mind training. How can we do that? First of all, we need to know what is the foundation of mind training. The foundation of mind training, the first step is to set up in your mindset or within your mind the criteria of judgment and handling matters relating to mind training. Actually, it is rather difficult to do. I will give you an example later and you will know it is not easy at all. Use wisdom to set up such criteria. Now let us see why it is so difficult. Because it needs to meet 3 requirements. Firstly, such criteria, or the criteria of handling matters, or the abilities and standard to judge, must be applicable to everything in daily life. This isn't hard. Secondly, they must meet the standards of the precepts. The third is the most difficult one. That is to include a kind of wisdom which can combine the relative worldly truth and absolute outer worldly truth. The true and proper mind training criteria must meet these 3 requirements. Relative worldly truth means the law of causes and effects in our earthy world, not those other criteria as said in the earthy world. Relative worldly truth in Buddhist Dharma refers to situations that conform to the law of causes and effects. Absolute outer worldly truth, I have explained it in the last lesson, that emptiness, which is a feature in your intrinsic nature, is called absolute outer worldly truth. If you are able to set up your own criteria for judgment and dealing with matters which meet the above mentioned 3 requirements, then it is called using wisdom to set up criteria that fit your Dharma practice. Your mind training can get better in the future. This is what you should do in the first step. Then how can we set up such criteria? How can we use our wisdom to do that? Firstly, we need to distinguish what is right and what is wrong. Don't think that it is very simple. If you hear the following example, you will know it is not easy at all. How can we distinguish right and wrong? Now I want to introduce a professor from Harvard University in US to you. His name is Michael Sandel. He is very famous now. You can find him on YouTube. He is a well-known political philosopher in America and an academician in the American Academy. He has integrated practicality and theory, so he was named as one of the most popular teachers in the world by The Observer in the UK. Why would I mention about him? Because he teaches in Harvard. He is a professor in the university that nurtures top-tier leaders and talents in the world. The course he teaches is the most popular course in Harvard, and Harvard students like to select this course. The course taken by most people has been uploaded to YouTube. It is also one of the few courses in Harvard that have been open to public viewing. This course has been published as a best-selling book. What's the name of this course that is uploaded to YouTube? There are in total 12 lessons. It is called Justice: What's the Right Thing to Do? Why would I talk about this? Because some of the problems mentioned in the video can be used to train you on how to distinguish right from wrong. Now I am going to teach you how to use wisdom to distinguish right from wrong. You can write down the following websites. You can know what were discussed in these 12 lessons from this website. Why would I appreciate so much about what he said and make this as part of teaching materials in our Buddhist class? Because what he said is excellent, and you will see that these Harvard students, who are all future leaders, and if you are not the most top-notch students, you can't enroll in this faculty. You will see how they reacted. I will ask you some questions later. I will write down your questions, so as to compare your level with that of Harvard students, or to compare the standard of our Buddhist teachings with Harvard students' level of answering questions. You will then know what position you are in. I will write down your answers. This is a question on right and wrong, and how we should choose. How will you choose? Please pay attention to the questions I will ask you later, so you need to listen carefully. The first one: suppose you were a tramcar driver, and your tramcar were hurtling down the track at 60 kilometers per hour. Suddenly you saw 5 workers working on the track. Then you found out that the brake of the tramcar that you were driving was broken. If it kept going, you were very sure that these 5 workers wouldn't have time to escape and they would die. They would definitely die. You knew for sure this would happen. You then found that there was a side track ahead, and only 1 worker were working there. You also noticed that the steering wheel was still working. You could drive the tramcar to the side track. Then you would save 5 people by killing only 1 person. Now please raise your hand to answer this question. What would you choose? The first one. Please raise your hand if you would choose to turn the steering wheel to the side track. Lots of you would do that. Quite a large number of people. I will show you later how to make judgment by applying precepts. There are at least a dozen of you would do that. I will write it down first, okay? Who would choose to go straight ahead? Fewer people, only 4. So now let's think, what is right thing to do, if factoring in Buddhist teachings? What should we do? Since we are learning Buddhist Dharma, should we kill 1 to save 5, or kill 5 to save 1? Now it is time for questions. You can raise your hand to explain the reason for your decision. If you chose A, which is swerve to the side track, you need to explain your reason. If you chose to go straight ahead, please explain yourself. Now it is your turn to talk. You are encouraged to speak more so we can have more discussion. Mr. Ho, you chose B, right? You just chose to go straight ahead and kill 1 to save 5. I want to know why. Because if I swerved, it is possible that the tramcar would derail. Can you tell us what would happen if the tramcar derailed? If it derailed, it would cause danger to all passengers in the tramcar, and it would kill not only 5 people but also hundreds of people. I will give you a hypothesis, because this question is mainly to train you on how to choose. Suppose you were the only person on the tramcar and the tramcar was empty. Only you in the tramcar. What would you do? Still go straight ahead. Why do you still choose to go straight ahead? Because the tramcar route is supposed to go straight ahead. You chose to go straight ahead because it is supposed to go straight ahead. Do you mean that you would let nature take its course? My planned route is to go straight ahead. You will follow the plan no matter what. Yes. Although it is supposed to go straight ahead, you can still swerve. If I swerved, I wouldn't know whether I would hit other vehicles. Suppose that you wouldn't hit any vehicle if you swerved. It would only kill 1 person at the side track. But I wouldn't know whether there would be other vehicles after I hit him. No, suppose there were no other vehicles. The question is limited to only one scenario, so you can choose easily. That is how the problem is designed. Let's suppose that you would only kill one person if you swerve. Would you still choose to go straight ahead? I will still choose to go straight ahead. Your answer is to go straight ahead. Please sit. I will explain the answer later. Some of you chose to swerve to the side track. Those who raised hand to choose this one, could you please explain your reason? Of two evils choose the lesser, of two evils choose the lesser, that is to say, the option with least harm is what we should choose. Please sit. Is there any other answers? If you watch the YouTube video later, you will see lots of Harvard students. They all actively raised their hands to answer questions. You will notice that fewer people would raise hand in ordinary Hong Kong schools or in our classes, but students in Harvard, they all actively raise hands, making everyone follow their mindset to reach the peak of thought. So if you want to learn how to become a top-notch people, you should learn from their behavior, but I think you're doing a good job. At least two of you stood up to express themselves. I will ask you again. Are you sure that your criteria for judgment and handling matters are correct? Let me illustrate the problem in another scenario. If you choose again, you would wonder whether the choice you made before is right. Let's see whether you would change your mind if the situations were different. Now you were not the driver, you were just an onlooker, who was standing on the bridge and looking down. When you saw that the tram car was about to kill 5 people or swerve to kill one, you were seeing the accident unfolding, and it would be a fatal accident. You were unable to warn these workers to walk away, but you found a fat guy standing next to you. The fat guy was watching the accident with half of the body leaning over the handrail. You knew that with a little shove, that fat guy would fall right in front of the tram car to stop it from going ahead. That is to kill 1 to save 5. Suppose there were no one at the tram car, and even you jumped off the bridge, you were still too slim to stop the tram car going. Now you have to choose. The first choice is to shove the fat guy down. Please raise hand if you agree. There are 2 people. I want to ask them the reason for the choice. Why would you choose to shove the fat guy down, if you can save 5 by shoving 1 person down? Why not shove 1 to save 5? Is there other reason? No. The other one who raised hand, do you have anything to add? Is there other reason? Would it help if I jumped down? It wouldn't help if you jumped down, but it would help if you shoved the fat guy. You chose to shove him down. Why would you choose that? Given the 2 choices I had, this is the only option. So you think this is the only way to save these 5 people? Yes. That is why you chose this answer. Thank you. So now I will raise another question. Please raise your hand if you choose to do nothing. Lots of you would do that. You chose the same answer as Harvard students did, many of you. You can see the same in the YouTube video. So what is the right thing to do? Kill 1 to save 5, or do nothing? I just asked you what are your reasons. Anyone wants to supplement your answers? Anyone? Those of you who chose to do nothing. Anyone can stand up to tell me why. Let's see if there is anyone who can give us reason for doing that. Mr. Chan, please. Hello, 2 Guru Masters. I don't think I can decide what to do in the whole incident. I see this incident from the perspective of causes and effects. From the perspective of causes and effects, you think you can do nothing, but if you shove the fat guy, you would save 5 people. It is not that you can't do anything, you can actually do something. Why did you say that you could do nothing? If I shoved him, I would kill a life. You think you can't do that because it would kill a life? Is it because the precepts tell us not to kill life? So you can't do that, because a similar incident once happened to me. There was nothing I can do. Could you please tell us what had happened to you? I once sat in a passenger van when it speeded down the hill. You were sitting in the car, but you were a passenger, not the driver. Neither were you an onlooker on the bridge. In movie, people would jump out of the car. Are you saying that it happened so fast, and you think there is nothing you can do? Judging from my experience in reality, there is nothing I can do. I only had time to recite the heart mantra of Guanyin in mind, so I deeply believe that, under these precarious situations, there is nothing to do. You were reciting the mantras in mind at the time, so you were all safe, or only you were safe. I didn't get injured, but the car was wrecked. If the car was wrecked, were other passengers injured? No one was seriously injured. No one was seriously injured. How about other passengers? Did they have minor injuries? Would you help them? I wanted to help, but I couldn't, because I had a concussion. I felt dizzy and I vomited. So I think the situations described in dramas are not true. Let's put dramas aside. Suppose you were conscious without concussion, and you had the ability to change the outcome. Would you shove the fat guy? If I had the ability, I would do so. If you had the ability, what would you choose? Would you turn the steering wheel to kill 1 to save 5? I don't think I have the right to decide. You think you don't have the right to decide who should die? Yes, that means you would choose to do nothing. When you were on the bridge, you would choose to do nothing. Yes, let nature take its course. Yes, but you just said if you had the ability, you would do something, but I don't think I had such ability. You're able to shove the fact guy down. I don't know whether I will have the ability in future, but you have the ability right now. If I were to use my own thought to change a man's life and death, I don't think it is right. You don't think it's right. In short, it is not right for you to decide the life and death of others. Okay, thanks. Please sit. Anyone has other opinion? Yes, please. Did you choose to do nothing? Yes. Please tell us your reason. Because it is a high-speed track. No one is supposed to work on there. It is a hypothetical question. I will use some real-life examples in future, but now it is a hypothetical question. The reason why Professor raised this question is mainly to see what moral standard people will use to judge what is right and wrong. I quoted his case and his hypothesis as example, to explain to you how these things are treated in the context of Buddhist Dharma. I want to teach you, in your mind, to set up a proper criterion in the future, so that you can train your mind. If you are not able to distinguish what is right or what is wrong in your mind training, you can't achieve anything. That is why I need you to choose and explain your reason. If the fat guy is just an onlooker, I would commit murder by shoving him over. Do you think that he is innocent? Yes. If I were the driver, I would think that the worker on the side track would consciously think that there won't be any tram car coming, and he felt that he is working in a safe place, so his alertness is low. However, these 5 workers in the main track should know that it is possible to have car coming at high speed and they shouldn't work there. They should have high level of alertness even at work. Please bear in mind that the question is for students to make decision, not to explain some situations. We are not going to discuss the question itself. I will only discuss your choice and reasons so as to teach you how to set up criteria, but in my mind, I really think that these workers should know where they are working, so if I were the driver, I would go ahead instead of swerving. Because I know these workers will naturally know to avoid the tram car. No one will get injured or die. We should focus on whether the driver should choose to go straight ahead or swerve, and whether the onlooker on the bridge should shove the fat guy or do nothing. Please don't digress from the key point. The key point of the question is to assume that going straight ahead would kill 5 and swerving would kill 1. I would not shove the fat guy down. You wouldn't do that. Is it because you think he is innocent or is there other reason? Shoving the fat guy down is the same as murder. The same as murder. Your answer is the same as that of Harvard students. Thank you. Please sit. Anyone wants to add to his answer? For the first question, I would choose to swerve. You would choose to swerve. Why would you choose to swerve? Kill 1 to save 5. Yes. Kill 1 to save 5. For the second question, I would choose to do nothing. You would choose to do nothing in the second question. Please explain your reason. Because I am not the driver and I am just an onlooker. Right, you're just an onlooker. I can't do anything. You think you can't do anything, but in fact you can. The premise of the question is that you can do something. You're aware that you can save 5 if you give the fat guy a little push. Would you do that? From my point of view, I wouldn't push the fat guy down. Why? That means I killed him and I will feel very guilty. You will feel guilty because you think you have killed him. Anyone wants to share his or her answer? There are 2 more. It is good for you to speak what you think. Hello, 2 Guru Masters. I would choose to do nothing. I would still do nothing if I were on the bridge. Why? Because Guru Master, you have taught us to use precepts, to consider everything. Doing this will break the precept. Yes. You think it will break the precepts because you kill a life? Yes, okay. Is there any other reason? No, thank you. Please sit down. Would another student please stand up and tell us your choice? Hello, 2 Guru Masters. I would choose do nothing. Please explain your reason. In the law of causes and effects, no matter we kill people unintentionally or intentionally, we will get retributions. I will think from the perspective of precepts. You said about killing intentionally and unintentionally. You consider this matter from the view of precepts. This is right. Thank you. Please sit down. Anyone else? The student at the back. Hello. 2 Guru Masters. For the first question, I would choose go straight ahead. Drive straight ahead. Why? Why would I drive straight ahead? Firstly, with the limited knowledge I have, I think I will kill the 5 workers in front. But this is only my limited knowledge and I am not sure whether I should drive straight ahead. In fact, it is possible that when I drive straight ahead, I will not kill these all 5 people in front of me. The premise of the question is that if you do nothing but go straight ahead, you would be very sure that you would kill 5 people. But if I choose to turn to sidetrack to kill 1 to save 5, I have factored in my choice. Going straight ahead would be a natural course. One of the Harvard students chose the same as you did, that is not to make a choice, but the professor told him that even if you don't choose, you have actually made a choice. Because you choose to do nothing, and it means that you give up your choice because you're well aware that if you turn the steering wheel, you will kill 1 to save 5. Not making choice is a choice itself, so you have made a choice. You can't say, you didn't choose. I want to let nature take its course. You think that your reason is to let it go naturally. I don't need to choose or make a decision myself. I would like to tell you that, in terms of the causes and effects, the professor is right. Even in the context of the law of causes and effects, in Buddhist Dharma, letting nature take its course is also a choice. In fact, you have made a choice. You decided to go straight ahead and kill 5 to save 1. You have already made a choice. For the second question, I wouldn't push the fat guy down. What is your reason? From the point of Dharma principles, pushing him down is fundamentally murder. Yes, it is murder. Besides, I am just an onlooker. I am not supposed to do anything excessive. Onlooker shouldn't do anything excessive. Okay. Is there anything that you think an onlooker should do? Yes, Mr. Chan. Mantras recitation. Mantras recitation. From your experience, you think mantras recitation is right? Yes, okay, thank you. Please sit down. Let's start explaining the answers. Why people would change the principle of killing 1 to save 5. You can see clearly, under the first scenario, whether to go straight ahead or turn to the side track. Some of you raised hand. Some raised hand to go straight ahead and some raised hand to turn to sidetrack. You would notice that more people would choose turning to sidetrack than going straight. That is to say, some people, they have a principle, which is, of 2 evils choose the lesser. When you're faced with 2 evil options, without a third choice, you can only pick one between these 2 choices. Some would choose the least harmful one based on the principle of killing 1 to save 5. This is why you would choose to go straight ahead under the first situation. But in the second situation, most people raised hand for not pushing the fat guy. You notice that people change the principle of killing 1 to save 5. In the first scenario, you chose to kill 1 to save 5. In the second scenario, when it means to push the fat guy down, you instantly change your principle, and not upholding the principle of killing one to save five. Why is there such a change? What is the real reason why people would change? Is there anyone who can answer what are the differences and why? A lot of Harvard students can't answer this question. It is not surprised that you can't either. Now I would like you to talk about the differences between these two situations. In the first scenario, there is a principle of killing one to save five, but in the second scenario, this principle has changed instantly. What makes this principle change? What are the differences between these two situations? I would like to know what differences between situation 1 and 2. In the first situation, I were the driver. In the second situation, I were an onlooker. The fat guy and I were outsiders. In terms of causes and effects, the fat guy and I had nothing to do with the incident. But for those 6 people, their relationship with this incident may be due to the causes and effects from past lifetimes that made this happen. So these are two different situations. Let me answer your question first. In terms of causes and effects, as long as you're a part of an incident, no matter whether you participate in it or not, if you have a chance to make a choice to change the outcome, it means that you have a relationship with them in the causes and effects from past lifetimes. Otherwise, you and the fat guy wouldn't have appeared in the scene. For example, he can choose to jump down on his own, or he is being pushed down to solve the problem. It means that he was already within the relationship of the causes and effects from past lifetimes. Otherwise he wouldn't be at the scene and he wouldn't have a chance to save those 5 people. As long as this thing happens, he is part of the causes and effects, though the situations on the bridge and on the track are slightly different. If we use causes and effects to explain this, this is my answer for you. If so, I can't answer the question. Okay, thank you. Please sit down. Anyone knows the differences between these two situations? Guru Master, I didn't change my choice. In the first situation, I would choose to turn to sidetrack. I would have to kill one to save 5. You would choose to turn to sidetrack in the first scenario. In the second scenario, I am an outsider and I don't know whether the brake is out of order or not. If I can't know whether the brake is broken or not, how would I realize that I need to save people and push the fat guy down? Besides, the speed of the tram car is 60 kilometers per hour. It is too fast, and how will I have time to think? You don't need to know that. The question is that you know the car is out of control and it is going to hit these 5 people. You don't see the car slowing down, which means that you already knew that there would be an accident. That is the premise of the question, and it requires you to make a decision with no time to think, so we can know about your true moral standard. I wouldn't push the fat guy, because even I push him, I still didn't know for sure that it could stop the tram car. If it doesn't stop, one more person would die, making thing even worse. The premise of the question is, killing one to save 5. Would you do that? I have made a choice. I wouldn't push the fat guy because I don't know whether pushing him would stop the tram car. I chose not to push, and it is not a matter of killing him or not. Okay, thank you. Please sit down. Anyone else? How about you? I think in the first scenario, it is 1 person versus 5 people. Like Guru Master just said, of 2 evils choose the lesser. The driver has to make a choice helplessly. In the second scenario, I will think from the point of knowing that somebody has to die. The people on the track may possibly know that they are in danger and they have to die. They don't know that. It is impossible for them to know and expect something like this would happen. We can't use this as a reason to differentiate these two situations, because both are under the same situation of killing 5 to save 1. In the second scenario, the fat guy is pushed down by me. He is innocent and I can't do that. You think that that fat guy is innocent and you shouldn't push him. One of the Harvard students also gave the same answer, that the fat guy is innocent, But the professor replied that people on the track are innocent too, especially the worker on the side track, because he shouldn't need to die. If you don't turn, he wouldn't die. The one on the side track is also innocent. If both of them are innocent, the fat guy and the person on side track. Why do you sacrifice the worker in the first scenario, then in the second scenario, you change your position and not sacrifice the fat guy? The professor wants you all to know and understand what are your criteria for judgment. I will get to that later. In the first scenario, the driver has no choice but to make a decision. In the second scenario, he psychologically thinks he is an onlooker, although he can make a choice. He didn't do anything. I think that is the difference between these two scenarios. Jera saying that in the first scenario, you have to make a choice. However, in the second scenario, you don't necessarily have to choose. Okay, let's hear answer of this student. I just want to say something about the scenario of being an onlooker. I don't know whether the driver would go straight ahead and kill 5 people. If I push the fat guy, he would fall and die. What if the driver is going to turn to side track and I also push the fat guy down? It would be 2 kill 1 to save 1. It is not worth it. Suppose the driver would go straight ahead and you can kill 1 to save 5. If you just push the fat guy down, I understand. But I wouldn't do that, because I don't have his permission. This is a good answer. One of the Harvard students said that same thing, because he didn't have the permission of the fat guy. The professor also said that it is a good answer. Why is permission so important? Of course, professor doesn't know Buddhist teachings and he wouldn't explain the importance of permission in the context of causes and effects. He explained that even in the moral concept of ordinary people, permission actually is very important. We will explain it later. What are the differences between permission and no permission from the point of Buddhist teachings? Please sit down. Isabel, please speak. Hello. 2 Guru Masters. The choice of answer is based on the 2 consideration factors of where I am and what situation I am facing. In the first scenario, I consider myself as a driver, and the situation at the time is something beyond my control, uncontrollable. Yes, because I am a driver, and the situation has gone beyond my control. I can either go straight ahead or swerve. Under this uncontrollable situation, I can only choose the lesser of 2 evils, so I choose to turn to side track, killing 1 to save 5. As for the second situation, why would I not uphold this principle too? Killing 1 to save 5, because in the second scenario, I find myself in the position of an onlooker. The situation I faced at the time was not an uncontrollable situation that compels me to make a choice, because I am merely an onlooker. I can choose to push the fat guy down or simply do nothing. A Harvard student also gave the same answer at the time, but the professor told him that actually, you can have control in both situations. You can control and decide how things will go. You can choose to killing 1 to save 5, or let the 5 die. He said that you can control this, because you can decide whether to push the fat guy or not. When you were the driver, you would only need to decide 2 things, kill 1 to save 5, or kill 5 to save 1. He said that these are all within your control. It is right, but other than this controllable factor, I also need to decide my own position. Because the situation in the second case is different from the first case. In the second situation, I am an onlooker. If I choose to kill 1 to save 5, this is no longer a compelling situation in which I must need to make a choice. The driver is the one who must need to make a choice. I don't have the right to kill somebody to rescue the whole thing. My judgment rests with my position, which is different from the driver's. Thank you. Please sit down. Now let's first talk about students' answers at the time. I summed up several situations to show you. Some of them you have mentioned, some of them haven't. You may notice that Harvard students came up with all kinds of answers. That is why they could become students in a top-tier university. Let's see. In the first scenario, some of students gave their answer. He said that the tramcar can't be controlled. In the second scenario, if you push people down, you're in control. It is similar to Isabel's answer, so the professor rebutted them. He said, you can control the steering wheel of the tramcar. You can control that. As for whether to push someone down or not, you can control yourself to push or not. For steering wheel, you have the same control as to turn it or not. So he proved that the two scenarios are the same, so he has to ask you to make a choice. That is why you can't use whether the situation is controllable or not as your reason to change the principle of killing one to save five. Why? Under the first circumstance, you would choose to turn the steering wheel because you are using the principle of killing one to save five, but in the second situation, you probably choose to do nothing. You don't uphold the principle of killing one to save five. You said that is because the tramcar can't be controlled. As for pushing people down, you can control that, so you decide not to push. But as the professor said, you can also control the tramcar to turn or not turn. You can control in both situations, so this is not the real reason for the change of principle. In another situation, some of the students rebutted. They said, the first situation is that the steering wheel of the tramcar can be turned, but in the second situation, it is pushing people down and the feeling is different. The first one is just turning the steering wheel, the other is pushing people down. It seems to be too vicious. Then the professor rebutted, the aim of the designed question now is to teach you how to make a choice between right and wrong. So he said, how about change the current setting? You can imagine that the fat guy is standing on a valve. You don't need to push him, you can open the valve by turning the steering wheel. The fat guy would stop the car from going ahead and save five people. With a change of question, we don't need to consider whether there is other change in the situation. We should focus the question on how should we make a choice, because we are reviewing your moral standards. So he said, you can imagine after modifying the question, then you wouldn't feel the difference between push and swerve. What would you choose then? The professor used this method to bring students back to the key point of the question. So the professor said that if you think that turning the steering wheel is different from pushing people down, it is not your real reason to change the principle of killing one to save five. So another student answered that you were the driver. You would have to make a choice. This is the same answer as you just gave me, but in the second situation, I would just an onlooker and I could stay out of it, so there is no need to choose. Then the professor rebutted, even if you chose not to get involved, it is still a choice you can choose, and you have the chance to kill one to save five, but you didn't do that. You have chosen not to save people from danger. In fact, you have made a choice. That is why not getting involved isn't the reason for you to change the principle of killing one to save five. One other student answered that in their first scenario, it is not killing someone consciously. This is not killing intentionally. But in the second scenario, pushing the fat guy down is an active, conscious killing. The professor rebutted him again that swerving to the side track is still an active, conscious killing. Your intent to swerve and kill the people to save five people. In both of situations, you are conscious of the consequences. You are also conscious of pushing the fat guy down. He said that under the both circumstances, you have the intent to do something. That is why killing intentionally or not is not the reason you change the principle of killing one to save five. Another student answered. His answer to the second scenario got the professor's appreciation. He said that in the second scenario, he did not get the fat guy's consent. There is difference between having the fat guy's consent and not having. Although the professor appreciated his answer, he still rebutted him that the worker on the side track was also sacrificed without being asked for consent. You killed him anyway to save the other five people. The fat guy was not asked for consent. The worker on side track was not asked for consent either. Both of them are the same, so whether or not you've got the consent from somebody whom you want to sacrifice can't be the reason for you to change the principle of killing one to save five. Another student answered. He said, the workers on the track are related to the incident, no matter the workers on the main track or the one on the side track. They are all involved in the incident, they are all on the track. So they are involved in the incident, but the fat guy is innocent, he has nothing to do with the incident, he is just an onlooker, standing on the bridge. Why should he be sacrificed? The professor rebutted him that the worker on the side track is innocent too, he also has nothing to do with the incident. Since he is on the side track, you can say that the 5 people on the main track are related to the incident, because the tram car is supposed to go straight but not swerve, so the person on the side track has nothing to do with the incident. But why do you choose to swerve if they are both unrelated to the incident? Why do you kill the worker on side track but not the guy on the bridge? Therefore, whether one is innocent or related to the incident or not, is not the reason for you to change the principle of killing one to save 5. So what is the real reason? Let's see. In the first situation, legally speaking, no matter the driver chooses to go straight or swerve, he would not be punished in law, except for some special legislations in certain countries, because it is a kind of accident. It is accident, so no matter the driver chooses to go straight or turn to side track, he would not be sentenced. But in the second situation, legally speaking, pushing someone down is murder and you would be sentenced. You would not be exonerated because you did this to save people. You wouldn't escape sentence because you kill people to save others. You wouldn't. You would still be sentenced. That is why euthanasia in some country will be sentenced. Now let's analyze how we should see the whole incident. The professor said that in the worldly law there is a thing called utilitarianism. Why would you choose to turn to side track in the first situation? Because you have applied a principle which is called utilitarianism. Utilitarianism means that when it fits the benefits and happiness of most people, then it can be proceeded, even though it means to sacrifice the happiness and benefits of some other people. You would choose to benefit most people and sacrifice the benefits of a small number of people. He said that this choice is based on one thing, which is to make utilitarianism as your standard. The standard of your mind training is to use utilitarianism for judging right and wrong, and also for your principle of dealing with matters. This is what you said, to choose the lesser of two evils. When you have two evil options, you would choose the one with least harm. If you're like this, your moral standard has been based on utilitarianism, because it will benefit the 5 people being saved, their families and their friends and relatives. It will benefit more than 5 people from the point of utilitarianism. Other than the 5 people, their relatives and families wouldn't have to suffer great harm. Their children will not suffer from any kind of loss or damage in interests. Their relatives and friends would be very glad and very happy. He said that the people who would benefit from the choice will be more than 5 people. That fits the rational principle of utilitarianism, which means that most people get benefits and happiness. If seeing the second situation from the point of worldly law, why would you do nothing and not push the fat guy down? Because you're using another principle which is called absolutism. Absolutism means that you would not do anything that does not comply with the principle. For example, homicide, because it is murder. Murder is murder. So a student said that murder is murder. It wouldn't change because you kill to save. Murder is not right. You can't do anything that is not right, so you don't do it. Because of this, you choose to do nothing. That is to say, you found out one thing, that in the worldly law we all most of time use utilitarianism to judge right from wrong, but sometimes we will also use absolutism. Then when should we use utilitarianism, and when to use absolutism? For different people there will be different choices. This is the methods we are using to deal with matters in this earthly world. But how do we see it from the Buddhist Dharma? In Buddhist Dharma, can we use utilitarianism and absolutism to set up the standard for our mind training? In fact, we can't do that. We can't. So what should be used as the standard for our mind training? In Buddhist Dharma, we should use the law of causes and effects. How can we distinguish right from wrong with the law of causes and effects? Firstly, The 5 people who are saved and their family will pay a debt of gratitude in the first situation. If you swerve to kill 1 to save 5, that will produce a set of causes and effects. That is, the 5 people who are saved and their families will repay gratitude to you, but you can't choose to kill 1 to save 5. In order to get more people to pay a debt of gratitude to you, you can't. Why not? Because if this is the case, you are using utilitarianism instead of the law of causes and effects to make judgments. The law of causes and effects can help us judge things more accurately. What causes you have sown, what effects you will get. When we know that, we can factor in more elements to make judgment. This can become our standard of mind training. What elements should we factor in? I will talk about that later. Secondly, the one got killed and his friends and relatives would resent you and probably take revenge. That is to say, the one got killed didn't care whether you save others or not because he thinks that he doesn't deserve to die. It is just what some of you have said, that he is innocent. He is on the side track. It has nothing to do with him. The tram car is supposed to go straight ahead. Why do you have to swerve? Why do you choose me to sacrifice? He wouldn't be happy about it when he is not happy. He would seek revenge and his families would seek revenge too. Is it that the children of other 5 people are more important but his children and friends and families aren't important? Their feelings don't need to be taken care of. Why should they be sacrificed? So they would seek chance to take revenge. So in the law of causes and effects, what kind of thing you do, what kind of effects you will get, there is another set of causes and effects, influence, which is that you will receive some people's sympathy in the society. Some people will sympathize with you for making that turn. They think that you did this for the principle of choosing the lesser of 2 evils. You wanted to save them because of utilitarianism. They would think that you do it right, and at the same time some Dharma protectors would protect you. They would think that you have very good spirit of self-sacrifice. You still made this decision even though you were under the burden of being revenged or blamed. In your mind, if you're thinking that killing 1 person can save more, you're still thinking of accountability. In your mind, you're under the burden of the retributions that this person or his families will seek revenge, and you sacrifice your own interests not to let nature take its course but truly want to save more people. If you have this attitude of shouldering responsibilities and you're well aware of what causes and effects would be, and you still make such a choice, then you would improve your mind for the better. In the second scenario, how do we see this situation with the law of causes and effects? Firstly, the 5 people you saved and their friends and families would pay a debt of gratitude. Secondly, the one who got killed and his friends and families will definitely seek revenge and resent you. Why? Can you see the differences between these 2 situations? In the first scenario, you will have other people's forgiveness and understanding. The one got killed and his families will probably seek revenge, not definitely will make revenge, but in their second scenario, they will definitely make revenge because he would think that I am just standing on the bridge and there is no reason for me to be sacrificed. His families would think this way too, so they definitely will make revenge. Thirdly, no one would sympathize because they don't think you're right. You would not get others' sympathy. Dharma protectors would not protect you either. In your mind nature, there is a tendency of foolish and excessive utilitarianism. You have overly focused on killing 1 to save 5. You're just counting killing 1 is a better deal because it would save 5. You have overly focused on the gain and loss in utilitarianism. That is why in the second situation, you would even choose to push the fat guy down. This is the difference between these 2 scenarios. Let's see now. In the law of causes and effects, I have done a good thing that benefits some people but harms some people. Can these 2 things offset one in the other? For example, I killed 1 person and saved 5 people, plus their relatives are happy. Will my karmic retributions be that I gain 4 people's gratitude because I have saved 5 and killed 1? 5 minus 1, I still gain 4. If 4 people pay debts of gratitude to me, it would be fine. So can it really be offset? In fact, It is not. You need to remember that there is no offset in the law of causes and effects. If you save five people would pay you debts of gratitude. If you kill one person, that one will seek revenge. It can't be offset. However, you may have this feeling that when you're being chased for life, 5 people would be around trying to save you. You have the feeling that someone may help you. Maybe you would feel better because of it, but they can't offset one another. Let's see the second scenario. If with permission, would there be any difference in terms of Buddhist teachings or the worldly law? This is what the professor reminded his student to pay attention to. One thing, having permission or not, is very important, but why it is so important? You need to explain your reason. The question is that if the fat guy agrees to be pushed down by you because he doesn't have the courage to do that, he wants your help. It would be like euthanasia. He wants your help to kill himself at this moment. I want you to know what you would choose and why. When you have got the fat guy's permission, he even requested you to push him down, would you push him? Please raise your hand to answer. Would you push him? 8 students raised hands. They would push him down when getting his agreement. The second choice is not push. Please raise hands. Even if he asked me to push, I still wouldn't push. Please raise your hands if this is your choice. Many of you. Now I want to know why you would push him down with his permission, because if he gave me his consent, he would not take revenge. He wouldn't take revenge. This is about causes and effects. Have you thought of it from the point of the worldly law? I will be sentenced with murder, but if you have already had his permission and you have indeed saved even more people, that is to say, you see the whole thing from the point of the law of causes and effects. You knew that he would be one of the victims. You will go to jail. You did this to save people, and he already knew that you wanted to help him, so you did so. That is to say, you did this with Bodhicitta. Although I will go to jail, but I will not be revenged, and also can save people. That is why I did it. Thank you. Anyone else?
Ryan.
I think that no matter what decision I made, someone is bound to be sacrificed. For example, I may be charged with murder in the worldly law. I may go to jail. Maybe I think you have helped him accomplish his wish. He may thank you because he wanted to sacrifice himself, but his family and other people probably won't forgive you. There may be sinful debts when you made a decision. You need to have the determination and Dharma mind to be sacrificed so that you would finish this. You did this for Bodhicitta. You both gave us good answers. Anyone else? Because I think that the fat guy has asked for my help. I think it is his expression of Bodhicitta, so I will help him to accomplish that. In other words, he had such Bodhicitta, and he wanted to die, but I don't give him a hand. Do you think that it is not right? Yes, if I don't help him fulfill his Bodhicitta, and I think it is better that one person dies instead of 5 people. I wouldn't think about any other things. As for his family members, I would explain to them the reasons why the fat guy has made such a choice. I think his families would understand. The 3 of you have answered very well. Your choice is almost the same as that of the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni, but you can see, in proportion, fewer people have raised hand to agree to push, but more people have agreed not to push. Hello Guru Master. I think in the worldly law, an individual doesn't have the right to decide on the life and death of people unless one is forced to do so. So you have chosen to push or not to push. The first one is Jera talking about the question we discussed before, so you have chosen to swerve in the first situation. How about the second? I don't choose in the second situation. You didn't choose in the second situation. How about the third choice now? I wouldn't push him. You wouldn't push him. You view as that you have no right to decide, but the fat guy already gave his consent, although he did. Other people don't have the right to decide. It is just like euthanasia. Euthanasia is a highly controversial problem. It can be done in some countries but not in some others. Please sit down. Anything to add? I would choose to push the fat guy down because he has such a mind. I would help him. I also know that I will have to take responsibility in the future. He is willing to save those 5 people. Why can't I take the responsibility? so I would choose to push him down. So you made the same choice as that of the other 3 classmates. Let's analyze the situation now in the second scenario. Legally speaking, if you push someone down with permission, you would still be charged with accessory to murder and you would still be sentenced, but whether it is a murder with intention, it will depend on how much the judge believes you. In terms of the worldly law, you would find that Harvard students have chosen not to push because they have applied absolutism. I wouldn't do anything that does not comply with the principle. Murder is murder, so they wouldn't push him down when the situation has changed. The fat guy agrees and requests you to push him down. Many students at the scene, just like you, raised hands to agree to push him down. Some of them chose not to. Even we are Buddhist learners. Some of you have chosen not to because we know that we would be sentenced in law, but if speaking from the worldly law, many of Harvard students raised hands. That means if the fat guy gave consent, many students would agree to push him down. It means that they changed the principle of absolutism instantly when the fat guy gave his consent. They immediately changed into utilitarianism. Utilitarianism means to kill 1 to save 5. Now that the fat guy gave his consent, it is okay to do that, but there is a very clever student. He told the professor that if there were camera on the bridge, many people would have made different choices and it would have affected their choices. Let's see how would we see this question from their Buddhist teachings in the law of causes and effects. The 5 rescued people and their families would pay you the debt of gratitude, and the one got killed would not resent you and take revenge because it is he who asked you to help him save people. He asked you to push him down, so he will not seek revenge. You have just said that, but the families of the one being killed, they would have resentment and probably take revenge. Probably means that it depends on whether with their mind nature they can take and understand it, or even whether or not they would believe that he has asked you to push him down. They may said that it is not true and you're lying. It depends on whether he believes in you and how he sees this, or it is possible that he would still take revenge. But in this thing, if he can truly prove that it is the fat guy who asked you to push him down, he agreed to it, and you can also prove that, you will be sympathized and will be protected by the Dharma protectors. In the worldly law, you need to prove it to others because at that moment there were only the 2 of you on the bridge. If there were no camera, there is no way to prove that he has asked you to push him down. If there were camera, you could prove it, but in the spiritual realm they would have telepathy to know what happened then, because they can retrieve the record to replay, just like some of our scientists found out before that every behavioral action we take, it would be recorded like a video camera in a certain space, and we can retrieve it just like taking out the data from the computer and then replay it. That is to say, they would know whether or not you have obtained other people's consent to help him fulfill Bodhicitta. If you had, they would protect you. You have good inclinations in your mind nature, and these good inclinations would help you in your Dharma practice. But some people would feel a little bit confused if they don't have the Buddhist teachings to help them judge, or they don't use causes and effects to see things. They would feel a bit confused. Why would they feel that? What they are confused about? The problem is why sometimes utilitarianism is used and sometimes absolutism is used in between agreeing and not agreeing. They would switch to utilitarianism. These isms are changing around. In fact, our criteria for handling matters and telling right from wrong can be changed also. If the matter concerned is related to feelings and emotions, or our relatives are involved in the matter, it would change even more. That's to say, if the 5 people on the track, 3 of them are my sons or all my relatives, I will definitely swerve facing 5 people on the track. It is no longer for me to use only the simple principle of killing 1 to save 5 when feelings and emotions are added in, or when they are my relatives. I may have done that, or if the one standing on the side track was my son and he was my only son and I don't know the 5 people on the track, I may not choose to go straight ahead. I may have chosen to swerve. The students who raised hand to choose to swerve might have added in the relationship of feelings and interests. That is why they have changed their choice. So if we use the simple utilitarianism and absolutism in the earthly world as our principle for mind training, we would change frequently. So we will see something called confusion. We as Dharma practitioners try to avoid these confusion even when we apply the law of causes and effects to weigh. The confusion will still appear. You would think that because of Bodhicitta, I would push, but if the fat guy, if a relative of mine, he asked me to push, I may not push, I make a change again. Therefore, Bodhicitta will also be affected by our self-interests and by our own feelings and emotions. Maybe I love this fat guy so much that and I wouldn't push if I were his mother, and he was my son. He asked me to push, but I wouldn't do it no matter you say that he has Bodhicitta, even the perfect Bodhicitta. I still wouldn't make this Bodhicitta, or I were his father. I wouldn't push. This has already affected you. So other than being a Dharma practitioner, other than seeing matters from the law of causes and effects, we have to add one more thing, which is precepts. We need to add precepts as our criteria for handling matters and telling right and wrong. Let's first explain what utilitarianism is. Utilitarianism means to do things that fit the benefits and happiness of most people. Who brought up this concept? It was from a British philosopher, as well as a law and social reformer. He was born in 1748. The concept was brought up in 18th century. The concept he introduced has very profound and long-lasting impact on our later generations, such that according to the present law, when you need to compensate for having knocked someone down or killed someone accidentally, and when the value of a human life needs to be calculated, it will be derived from utilitarianism. So he has great influence on our later generations. What is the rationale for making the choice? According to utilitarianism, if you can kill one to save five but you don't do it, then it is considered wrong. Let's take war as an example. In order to save more people, you have to sacrifice a small group of people. You need to fight a war, and someone is bound to be sacrificed. Some college students also take example from 911 that in the passenger aircraft from Pennsylvania they could have chosen to let nature take its course by letting the terrorists hit the aircraft into a place with most people and crash it, or letting it hit the Pentagon and crash, killing more people, but they have chosen to crash it in a wasteland and rather kill themselves to die more meaningfully so as to save more people. So they all think that this is utilitarianism. That means it doesn't matter that I die, I have to die anyway, and the plane is about to crash. Even I don't let nature take its course, I still have to die as such. I would rather not let nature take its course. I need to choose where to crash so that more people can be saved. That is why they said that this is utilitarianism. So they think utilitarianism is good because they all chose to save more people and crash the plane in a wasteland. This utilitarianism in our present society, in our daily life, is what most people would apply. They use it to decide on what to give or take, as well as to judge right from wrong. Actually, this utilitarianism is a branch of consequentialism. The main title is in fact called consequentialism, which means that all people would use the outcome to measure whether I should do this thing or not. It is right or wrong. That is to say, we make decisions based on the consequences and the expected results. The answers you gave to many of the questions are based on consequentialism. You thought about whether you can save people or not. Even when I push the fat guy down, can I save those 5 people? If I can't save them, I wouldn't do that. You're based on the expected result for actions instead of precepts and the law of causes and effects. So, as Dharma practitioners, what should we use as our criteria? It is to interplay precepts with the law of causes and effects as our criteria. Then it is considered correct. Then someone would ask whether precepts is a form of absolutism, which means unchangeable, so long as the precepts forbid I won't do it if it breaks the precepts. I won't do it. Or murder is murder, anything that is against the rules. I won't do it. Is this a form of absolutism? Let's see this thing from the point of precepts. There are two kinds of precepts. The first one is called self-nature precept. Self-nature precept means it is what it is. By its intrinsic nature, it exists naturally. It is a law of nature. It exists even if you have not accepted the precepts. For example, when you break these precepts, you are subject to the causes and effects. For instance, killing, stealing, sexual misconduct and false speech are included in the 5 precepts. This is what we as Dharma practitioners should comply with at the outset. You can't choose not to accept them. You must remember in the 5 precepts, 4 of them are called self-nature precept. That is, even if you have not taken them, you will still have causes and effects. If you break them, it will definitely be so, only that when you break the precepts after having taken them, your mental strength toward breaking precepts is getting stronger, which will cause more obstacles in your future Dharma practice. The other kind of precept is called covered precept. Covered precept is also called prohibited precept. It was made by the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni. Why it is called covered precept? Its aim is to block and stop you from breaking other self-nature precepts. For example, the precept on alcohol drinking does not allow you to drink alcohol so that you will not become irrational after getting drunk, making you to break the 4 precepts of killing, stealing, sexual misconduct and false speech mentioned before, so it is called covered precept. That is why covered precept can have a kind of discretionary leniency. If you only drink a little bit of wine, and as long as you do not become irrational, that makes you break the 4 self-nature precepts, then you would be leniently treated as if you have not violated precepts, and there may not have causes and effects. You may possibly have, but may not necessarily have. In the first scenario, it is called swerving to kill intentionally. In an accident, it is an accident, but you have intentionally swerved to kill one person. In the law of causes and effects, firstly, the 5 people got saved and their families will pay you debts of gratitude. The one got killed and his friends and family will resent you, and they probably seek revenge. Thirdly, the rest of sentient beings, they would give you sympathy and you would get protection from Dharma protectors. He would think that you have bodhicitta. Among the unacceptable choices you have chosen to take responsibility, you knew well that in causes and effects, the families will really take revenge against you, and you may be subject to legal punishment. You know that, but you still do so because it was an accident. You would have positive elevation in your mind nature, and in terms of karmic retributions, you would have at least 5 or 5 multiple times of being rescued as karmic retributions, that is, as karmic retribution in your future lifetimes. You would have at least 5 or 5 multiple times of your being saved. Why multiple times? Because other than those 5 people who would pay you debts of gratitude, their families, plus all sentient beings in the spiritual realms who have witnessed the whole thing happen, they would, in their mind consciousness, sympathize with you, and some Dharma protectors would help you. When adding up all together, it will become a number of 5 multiples. So you would see that the Buddhist sutras taught by the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni, and some stories he told about what this person had done in the past lifetimes and what had happened subsequently, you would notice that all of it have a cycle, and most of time the retributions of causes and effects would be bigger than before. This is due to all these factors. If in this incident you didn't swerve to kill people, that means you didn't swerve, you have chosen to kill 5 people. Then how would we see this matter in the law of causes and effects? Firstly, the 5 people got killed and their friends and families would resent you. You must remember, whatever you say won't help you. Say that you didn't have a choice, but in their spiritual realm and Dharma protectors, They all can see it actually. In fact, you can choose. There was an idea in your mind. How about to swerve killing 1 to save 5? They know that you can do it, but you have chosen to kill those 5 people naturally because you think that according to schedule, it is supposed to go straight. So you go straight no matter what. You can't deceive anyone in the spiritual realm, and Dharma protectors, they all saw what happened, so they think that you had the responsibility to reduce harm, but you failed to do that. You didn't take the responsibility to reduce harm, so the 5 people killed and their friends and families would resent you and probably take revenge. You may get the sympathy of some people, especially those who know what you think in your mind, that is, people still survive in the world, but there are other sentient beings such as people in the spiritual realm or Dharma protectors who can see what you think in your mind. They would despise you. The Dharma protectors won't protect you, and in the future lifetimes you would at least get retribution for 5 or 5 multiple times for not being saved from danger and being sacrificed. You would get the retribution, and you would not have good elevation in your mind nature, because you didn't perform certain of your responsibilities. So, we should know that if we as Dharma practitioners, you need to clearly analyze the causes and effects. You can say, the situation is so urgent, I need to decide instantly to swerve or not. How would I have the time to think about the law of causes and effects? This is what you are trained for every day. You should have known from your daily training as to what criteria and standard you should use to judge right and wrong, so when you are confronted with urgent situations, your instant reaction will follow your usual thinking and decide what principle you should adopt in the incident. You will know very soon what to do if you don't usually contemplate this often, and you use utilitarianism and absolutism in the earthly world to decide. Then you would do what you did before. You didn't think and you didn't apply a right set of criteria for mind training in Dharma practice. The correct criteria for mind training is that you must know what responsibility you need to shoulder in terms of causes and effects. So when you bear karmic retribution, or you're being sacrificed one day, or when you're hurt one day, or you are hit by someone in an accident, you should understand the karmic retribution you get now is attributed to some previous causes sown before. If you can understand this principle, you in your mind wouldn't be so furious, or wonder why you have to sacrifice me, or wonder why other people wouldn't have such accident but me. Hence, your mind would be confused and you won't succeed in practicing. Therefore, a real mind training is to understand the principle of causes and effects. When you know that all things have causes and effects, you would have the same wisdom as the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni after attaining Buddhahood. It is like when the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni was alive in this world. He was chased by a wooden stake to pierce his leg. When he failed to use supernatural power to avoid it, he just naturally stretched out his leg, saying peacefully in his mind that, just pierce it to revenge. You can take this revenge. I let you seek revenge, and I know this is what I should bear. This is what I should take. Then your mind wouldn't have greed, anger and ignorance, or fury or resentment. Then you can train your mind, that is to say, you know you are part of the causes and effects. Good and bad both exist in this combination. When your karmic retribution comes, you are pleased to take it, and whether good retribution comes, we are all pleased to accept it. But when taking it, we know we have to upgrade our standard. We should do it better in the future so that we can train ourselves better, and better then our mind training will improve. So it is necessary to understand all the law of causes and effects so that you can do it, and then add precepts in that to help us make decisions. How can we add precepts? Let's see whether precepts can be changed or not. Are precepts a kind of absolutism? Let's first take an example. In the 4th volume of the Maharapaya Kausalya Sutra, there is a story. It is about how the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni killed one person to save 500 people. The sutras read like this: before the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni attained Buddhahood, he was a Dharma practitioner in one lifetime. He has supernatural power. He was on board a commercial ship in the sea. At that time there were 500 merchants on board. With him 500 The number in the old time didn't mean exactly 500 people, but few hundred people. The captain of this ship knew that these 500 merchants were rich. They wanted to kill him for money, and they had a killing mind. Since the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni has supernatural power in his past lifetime, and when he observed the behaviors of the captain, he knew that the captain had a mind to kill him for money, and he used his supernatural power to observe. Then he found out that these 500 merchants were Dharma practitioners. They are reincarnations of bodhisattvas. They have reached the stage of non-regression, Avinivartaniya, which means that they would not regress in their path of Dharma practice. They would become Buddhas as long as they kept practicing. He knew that the captain, if he killed these non-regressive bodhisattvas, would have worse karmic retribution. Even killing ordinary people would have great karmic retribution. If killing non-regressive bodhisattvas, the karmic retribution will be much greater. He knew that if the captain managed to kill them, he would descend into the evil path and could never get out. He had a thought at that time that in order to prevent the captain from committing this evil karma that made him unable to come out of the evil path forever after 7 days of consideration, you need to be careful, because it is very important if you have the time to choose. Unlike the case before, if you have the time to think, and you need to think carefully. He thought about it for 7 days. Is there any way to stop this murdering act? He thought it for a long time, but still no solution. Eventually, in the critical moment when the captain really wanted to kill these 500 people, he chose to kill the captain to save these 500 merchants. Although he has saved 500 merchants, he has also committed a killing act. He knew that he has to bear the karmic retribution. He also applied the law of causes and effects to see this thing, and he also factored in precepts in terms of causes and effects. He knew that he would suffer karmic retribution. He did it to save that captain and to save that 500 merchants. He was willing to sacrifice himself. He has considered about causes and effects, and also precepts, but he still did it. What consequence would that be? Although the Lord Buddha has killed the captain, he in fact has saved him from outside. It looks evil, but his thoughts and intent are virtuous. Now let's see. There are self-nature precepts and covered precept. In the precepts, he has violated their self-nature precept. Once you break it, there is bound to be causes and effects. Now the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni killed one person intentionally before becoming Buddha. How should we see it in the context of the law of causes and effects? Firstly, as said in the sutras, the one got killed turned out to be the one got saved. After that man died, when his intrinsic nature was suddenly recovered, he would understand all the things that he did not understand in the past. The potential of intrinsic nature could all come out, although it comes out only a second, less than a second, or more than 1 or 2 seconds. The sutra said that after that man was killed, his awareness was recovered and he realized that he was wrong. It is wrong for him to have contemplated to kill 500 people for money, so he repented so that he went the heaven realm to become a celestial being. Therefore he wouldn't seek revenge, and this is a true result. You all like to see things by results. In fact, in the end, saving this man, and this man wouldn't take revenge. You must remember, if the awareness of this man was not recovered, he might arouse hatred in his mind. He would think, what is my killing to do with you? What is my killing for money to do with you? And why do you stand in my way to make a fortune? All people in the world would now think this way. It is wrong to stand in my way to make a fortune. He would seek revenge. Secondly, if the 500 merchants know and agree that the captain wanted to murder them, and that man who killed the captain has saved them, if they knew, they would pay debts of gratitude. The killer is the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni in his past lifetime. If he did it truly for Bodhisattva, in his mind nature, he would have good elevation, because he was willing to take responsibilities of causes and effects. He has put Bodhisattva and mercy and compassion in the first place, so he did that, and it induced huge increase in his merits. He could become a Buddha one day, and indeed, it is a fact. Fourthly, if someone among the 500 merchants is willing to be witness with the law we have today, If someone is a witness in law, this killer would still be sentenced, and if in the current situation someone used a video camera or mobile phone to shoot images and someone or the judge thought that he was guilty, then this killer would still be sentenced, as this story or this real case happened before the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni became a Buddha. In very ancient time there were no video camera or mobile phone at that time, and the result is positive. This is that otherwise the result wouldn't be what the sutras said. Causes and effects would actually change. This is called determination of causes and effects by mind nature. You must remember that causes and effects are determined by mind nature, instead of by precepts. Why would we say that? Please see it clearly. In the first situation, the sutra said that awareness of the captain was recovered after his death, so he wouldn't seek revenge because he repented and knew that he was being saved. What if his awareness cannot be recovered? Because there are some people who can't. If his mind nature is too evil, he can't recover awareness even for 1 second. He would go the evil path and became very fierce. He would seek revenge, and it was just a matter of time for that. The evil mind nature of this ship captain will affect the future causes and effects of the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni. If the 500 merchants accepted that the captain killed had wanted to murder them, now that you have killed the captain to save them, if they accepted this, it would be fine. If they don't know, they would wonder, why would you kill him? He was just steering the ship and you only thought that he would kill us. Do you have any proof? Could you provide any evidence? He did not really murder us, but you had already killed him. Would it be too arbitrary? Are you insane? They just thought that you have killed that man. If they don't agree with you, they would punish you or take some actions against the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni in their mind nature, so the causes and effects would change again. Thirdly, there is a good elevation in the mind nature of the murderer. He did this out of bodhicitta, so it would affect his causes and effects in mind nature. That is why he has good retribution later on, and his Dharma practice is getting better and better. This is the impact of the mind nature on causes and effects. Fourthly, if someone among these 500 merchants is willing to be witness, he would be a witness against the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni. If he doesn't agree, and it is possible that the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni would be charged guilty and be sentenced. This is the cause and effect produced from his mind nature, which would influence the causes and effects of the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni. The fifth situation would be if someone has videotaped or taken pictures with mobile phone, and someone or the judge thought that the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni was guilty, and that the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni did not have a sufficient evidence to prove that this captain has intended to kill people. If this was the case, the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni would still be sentenced. So you'll find these 5 situations are all about mind nature. It is about some people's mind nature and the mind nature of a group of people. It is like among our classmates. Some think in this way and some think in that ways and some think the other ways. In other words, when these natures of mind are mixed together, it would affect the causes and effects in different directions. As I have already said, your causes and effects can be good or bad. They can't be offset. When they can't be offset, sometimes they are good and sometimes they are bad. So when would they be good and when would be bad? This is the law of nature. It can't be controlled by you because it is the mind nature to determine causes and effects, and the mind nature is the most unstable factor, which can change anytime. So your causes and effects will change too, since mind nature determines causes and effects. How can we explain it? We can quote it. We have talked a lot about it before. That is all. Karmic forces, retributions of causes and effects, are all made up by sentient beings' mental strength. It is he who decided whether to take revenge or not, making you have the retributions. Therefore we must upgrade our own mind nature at certain level. When we have practiced well, we can liberate ourselves from the web of mental strength of the karmic force. We call this liberation from the cycle of karmic existence, and even the attainment of Buddhahood, or no more causes and effects, after entering the Dharma realm, because in this earthly world, the law of causes and effects, is operating properly in nature. This is what we talked about in the last lecture, so you need to remember, precepts is the guideline in yardstick to assist the elevation of mind nature. It is not the precepts to determine causes and effects. Sir, some of your classmates have rebutted before, asking me why you always teach us precepts. He said that precept is like a tightening hoop spell. He was unconvinced why using precept as a tightening hoop spell to bind me, asking me to do this and to do that. He said that precept is a tightening hoop spell that deceives Dharma practitioners. What I said today is to tell you that no matter whether you use utilitarianism or absolutism, or even the law of causes and effects to judge right and wrong, you would still be confused because your wisdom hasn't reached the level of the Lord Buddha. The way you see things would be clouded by emotions, or you've added in greed, anger and ignorance. Therefore your law of causes and effects would change any time you would get confused, and all people would think differently in their mind nature, which would affect you too. It is like you raised hand just now. You chose this answer, and they chose that. If your mind is not clear, you saw so many people have raised their hands, you may think that they were probably right. Maybe I should follow him. Then you would be confused. We all have the herding effects because other people make us feel confused, so we can't practice well. We don't have good mind training standard, so we would be confused and we make mistakes because of it. So we need to find someone with wisdom like the Lord Buddha, following the standard set by him, and observe it as precept, so that we wouldn't make mistake easily. Therefore, precept is not a tightening hoop spell. It is not something used by guru masters to oppress their disciples. Why would I say that? Because a disciple of mine had once rebutted me on this publicly. I have taught him for 7 years and I still can't change his mind, so I must explain it more clearly. You need to remember that precept is only a yardstick, something that is to help you make judgments on matters. Precept can help you judge a matter. This is a good index to help you establish your mind training standard, and you need to know that precepts are not used to determine causes and effects. It is not precepts that determine causes and effects, they just helps you. So what determines causes and effects? It is the mind nature that determines causes and effects. The traction of karmic force would make you face trial after death. We have talked about it from the 1st to the 15th sessions. What is this? Who is going to judge you? Actually, they are people from the spiritual realm. They can see the whole process and they know what your mind is thinking after you die. There are many groups in the spiritual realm and you would exist in a particular group. It is like you live in China or in Hong Kong. They would capture you and start trial. Actually, the standards are set with the mental strength of that group of people and they will trial against you. So these trials are determined by the mind nature. That is to tell you the principle of using the mind nature to determine causes and effects. Since it is the mind nature to determine causes and effects, it can change easily. Therefore we need precepts for support, because mind nature is something that changes frequently and is messy. That is why we need precepts. How we should see this incident from the point of precepts. There are 2 kinds of precepts. One is called to-do precepts. That means something you should do. For example, all kinds of virtuous behaviors and deeds you should do. When you receive precepts, you need to remember that you should do all virtuous things. What is called not to do precepts? It means something you shouldn't do. That is, not to do precepts. That means all kinds of evil behaviors and deeds you can't do. So you must remember there are 2 kinds of precepts. The first one is something, all kinds of virtuous things, that you should do. If you don't do, you would break the precepts. The other kind is something that you can't do. If you do, you would break precepts. If I break precepts, what consequences would that be? So you need to remember that it is just a standard or guidance. I have already said that precept itself isn't to determine causes and effects. It is the mind nature that determines causes and effects. Precepts can only help you. It only helps you reduce doing certain behavioral deeds and reduces the bad causes and effects to affect your Dharma practice so as to increase the good causes and effects to help you with your Dharma practice. So how would you use wisdom to set up the foundation of your mind training? That is to say, when you establish the foundation, you need to use this foundational basis of mind training to set up the standard to help you distinguish right from wrong. These would become your insights, which are the elements I just taught you on how to judge matters. I will give more detailed explanations later. This is how you judge things. This is how you judge by the law of causes and effects. This is how you judge by the worldly standards. If we add precepts, we would judge in this way. These will become your insight. So you often hear people say, views and behaviors. How do those views come about? Views mean insight. Insight would become the standards for some behaviors which will affect your behavioral deeds. We call it behaviors. In fact, your view will influence behaviors. So the first step we take in mind training is about how we would have our standards of judgment on matters, or decisions on choices, or discernment of right and wrong, to be set up again, and these precepts must be in congruence with all other precepts, and the law of causes and effects. By that, we can train our mind, or else you can't train your mind. Let's go back to the case of the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni in terms of precepts. If the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni had already taken the precepts in his previous lifetime, then things would be different. Already taken precepts and not yet taken precepts are different. If he had already taken precepts, and if he knew for himself that he was capable of saving 500 merchants, but he didn't do that, it means he has forsaken his responsibility to save people. It belongs to a violation of precepts. What precept did he violate? It is the to-do precepts, that is, all kinds of virtuous behaviors and deeds you should do, but you don't. If you were the one standing in that position, you were on that ship and you had the supernatural power to know that he would kill people, you had the ability to save those 500 people, but you didn't. You have chosen to turn a blind eye. All these are violation of precepts in terms of causes and effects. If you have broken the precept, what consequences would that be? You would attain Buddhahood slower. You would become Buddha slower. Why? Because of the insufficiency of Bodhisattva, and for at least 500 or its multiple times more in the future, you would not be saved. That means no one would come to your rescue even when you're in danger, and sometimes you would be sacrificed. The situation of not being saved from danger would occur to you for 500 times, or even in 500 multiple times. This is the retributions for your breaking of the to-do precepts and not taking responsibilities. Then it can be implied in the case we just talked about, I obviously can swear, but I didn't do. What karmic retribution would that be? Now the case of the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni has already told you, to do precepts require you to do all kinds of virtuous behaviors and deeds. If you don't do it, you would attain Buddhahood slower. If you do, you would increase good causes and effects to help your Dharma practice. You would become Buddha faster, and all evil behaviors and deeds, if you do that, you will cause evil retributions for yourself. But if you can observe the precepts, you can reduce some bad causes and effects, making your Dharma practice better and not be affected so easily. In other words, breaking to-do precepts, you would slow down all your Dharma practices. Breaking not to-do precepts, you would produce sufferings and pain, because all these evil retributions would cause you sufferings and pain. But the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni should obviously have to observe the precepts. And the killing precept is a self-nature precept, which, if violated, they're bound to be causes and effects. We just talked about what the causes and effects would be. And you now have killed someone, so what do we call this then? It is called precepts exception, when you apply the law of causes and effects to make judgments with the precepts telling you that we can't kill people. Yet even with both considerations, you still choose to kill under such circumstance. We call it precepts exception. You would even be more confused about when we can have precepts exception, and when we can't, actually. After applying the law of causes and effects with precepts, some crossroads will appear and you don't know how to choose, so I ask you now. I want to see whether you are confused now. The question is that if you were the fat guy, if you knew that you can save 5 people by jumping down, should you jump down to save them? The second question is it a violation of precept if you don't jump down? We just said all kinds of virtuous things we should do are called to do precepts. Not doing so would be violating the precepts. Now, does it count as a violation? Now I want you to raise hand. The first one. If you were the fat guy, would you jump down to save people? Quite many, yes. Quite many people, quite many of you think that you should jump down to save people. You all observe the precepts. The second one, would not jumping down be considered as violating the precept? Please raise your hand if you think so. Not as many people as before. Please raise your hand if you think it is not violating the precept. Fewer people think it is not violating the precept. You all begin to understand. I think most of you start knowing where the principles are. Now let's talk about what are the law of causes and effects. If jumping down to save people. If you jump down to save people, the 5 people saved and their friends and families would pay you the debts of gratitude. Of course, we don't save people for the sake of being paid debts of gratitude. We of course do it because of bodhicitta. The second one is that the friends and families of the suicide person may have resentment, but they wouldn't take revenge. What do they blame? For example, your father would think that you don't regard me as your father. I am old and 80 years old. I am at such old age, and you don't care about me. But to save those strangers, I raised you up, but you are so ungrateful. That is it. Your friends and relatives would resent you and wonder what have gone wrong with you. With the Buddhist teachings, you are learning that make you jump down to save other people. If they knew that beforehand, they wouldn't have let you learn Buddhism. They would resent but wouldn't seek revenge. They wouldn't find their sons to seek revenge and beat you up. The third one is that you would be sympathized and the Dharma protectors would protect you. They would think that you had done your Dharma practice well. The fourth one is you would have good inclination in the mind nature, and you would receive 5 times or multiple of 5 times retributions of being rescued in future. What if you don't jump down? If you don't jump off, there would be 2 results for people already taken precepts and not yet taken precepts. If you have already taken precepts and you don't jump to save people, it belongs to violating precepts. That means you have not complied with the standard to upgrade your mind nature, because according to do precepts, you should do more good things. But you don't. It would slow down your Dharma practice. You would become Buddha slower. Precepts are meant to increase your good causes and effects. But you don't do it even you know about it, then you would violate it. For people who have not taken precepts, it belongs to the lack of bodhicitta in his mind. He does not know that he should do. He does not know that this thing ought to be done, so he is just lacking bodhicitta, knowing that it must be done but does not do it. Such mental strength would be less strong. This is the difference between people already taken precepts and not yet taken precepts. If this person has the ability of saving more people, for example, this person holds a very important position. He thinks that, if keeping his life, he would save even more people because more people are waiting for his rescue. If he jumps down, then more people will lose rescue. If that was the case, he does not violate the precepts, nor lacking bodhicitta. It is only when he weighs his options, he finds himself very important, his position, his stature very important. He is to save more people. Perhaps many more people are to be rescued by him. If he dies, then he can't save these people, so he would not jump down. If this was the case, it wouldn't be counted as violation of precepts. But no matter he is the first kind or the second kind, he would have the third kind of karmic retribution, that is, retribution of not being saved for at least 5 times or 5 multiple times. Even you say that you do not jump down because you have to save more people are waiting for your rescue. There would still be 5 times or 5 multiple times that you wouldn't be saved. In their future, the 5 people killed and their friends and families would not resent you because they don't think you should jump down to save them, so they wouldn't resent you. Neither would they take revenge. What would the lack of bodhisattva lead to? You wouldn't be sympathized and get protection from the Dharma protectors. Dharma protectors would think that you have already received the precepts but you didn't jump down, and your position is not very important and you're not going to save more people, but you still don't help. They would think you in this way, so they won't save you next time. It is mostly like that. You don't have the best inclination in your mind nature, meaning that you don't have a spirit of sacrifice. It is not the best, but it doesn't mean no good. Don't get confused. Not the best doesn't mean you're no good, so how should we weigh the options? To do precepts mean something we must do to elevate our mind nature. We should do some good deeds, but I need to support my father and my mother. I have children at home, they are still young and need my care. If I jump my family members, at least 5 people, my wife, my dad, my mom, my kids. There are in total 5 people. I decided not to jump, but I am also a Dharma practitioner. There are to do precepts. In Dharma practice it said that I should do all the virtuous things, but how should I do? You need to remember you can choose not to jump. If you don't jump, it would mostly mean slowing down your Dharma practice just because of your lack of bodhisattva, but you wouldn't deserve evil, pain or karmic retributions at most. When you reminiscing your past in the middle of night, you would regret a bit for not jumping. That would mostly be it, but I want to tell you what you should do. To do precepts means when reminiscing past in the middle of night, if you really think that you're lacking bodhisattva, this isn't considered as a very serious problem, but you need to make up for this shortcoming. You need to. Whenever you see these disasters happening, no matter you see on TV, newspapers, hear people talking about it, or see it with your eyes, you need to do one thing, that is, you must immediately and at the scene practice Dharma, or recite mantras, or pray for them, then dedicate the merits to bless them. You must do this. If you have taken the precepts, and you don't even do that, it would be violating precepts. Your Dharma practice would become extremely slow. This would be your karmic retributions. Remember this. You have to do that. If you forget, you are too frightened to do anything at the scene, it is okay. It is okay to do that later when you think of it, when you have awareness. You must do it when your awareness arises. You must start doing that from that moment. If you come to think of it but still say that I would do that after I return home, then after returning home, it is time for meal and you forget about Dharma practices, then another day has passed. Or you did it after a very long time, it would drag your Dharma practice to become more and more slowly. You would have more karmic retributions in the future. You would have more hurdles in your Dharma practice. You would be like that. You would have this kind of karmic retribution. So remember that when you have taken the precepts, this is what you need to do. But if you don't jump, it won't be a very serious issue. Now let me tell you a story. It is in the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni's biography. In this life it tells a real story of sacrificing your body to feed a tiger. He said that many kalpas ago a brahmana was practicing Dharma in a remote mountain area. She didn't do anything evil and her heart was full of kindness. One day, when the brahmana was looking for food, she found a newborn tiger, a tiger that had just given birth to several tiger cubs. She was very hungry. She didn't have the strength to find food and she was unable to produce milk to feed tiger cubs. She gave birth to several tiger cubs. The tiger thought, if eating one tiger cub I would regain the strength or produce lactate milk to feed other tiger cubs. This is what we said about the principle of utilitarianism, of killing one to save more. That mother tiger was thinking like this. A saying goes that even a beast does not eat its offsprings, yet she was thinking to eat one of my sons whom I gave birth to in order to save other sons. When the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni saw this, he thought that it was too cruel and he felt very sad. In order to keep all the tigers alive, he put his head close to the tiger's mouth so that the tiger needn't chase him, and he said, "Eat me." He offered his body to the tiger to eat and saved several tigers. Such kinda fearless almsgiving has eventually completed as merits. Why? You must be careful that not everyone can do this. If when you were bitten by a tiger which is too weak to kill you by one bite, you would feel painful to death. I also said before that there would be painful suffering during the 4 great separations. If your bodhisattva is not enough, or you just put your head impulsively, you would have hatred in your mind when it bites you. Or during the 4 great separations you are in so much pain that your hatred comes out. Some sentient beings would regress as bodhisattva would recede. He would regret for giving the head to the tiger, so you scold the tiger, "What is wrong with you? Why don't you just bite me to death? You make me in so much pain, but not death. You are so bad." So you may have hatred in your mind. Just when your hatred comes out, it is possible that you are initially pledged bodhisattva, and the good fruitions have not yet emerged. You would immediately enter into the evil path because of your very strong mental strength. So you need to be careful about this, but the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni can do that because he has been in Dharma practice for many lifetimes without changes, and he only gets stronger and stronger no matter how much pain he was in. Even the pain was killing him or he was suffering a lot. As Bodhisattva remained unchanged but becoming stronger and stronger with such a strong almsgiving mindset, he could thus complete his Dharma practice of the 6 parameters very soon. So he attained Buddhahood later and elevated his awareness to the stage of becoming Lord Buddha, and he becomes the master for all celestial and human beings, teaching and saving all sentient beings in great breadth. Therefore you have to remember that you must know what level of standard you are up to when you don't have sufficient level of bodhisattva, and you understand very well you need to do what I have just taught you to perform there, to do precepts, that is to recite mantras, practice dharma, dedicate merits, and pray to complete the precepts you have received. Even bodhisattva is not enough, you still have some sort of upgrading of yourself. At least not regression. If you don't save people from danger and you just look and do nothing, then you would regress. But if you have done what I teach you, or at least you have made up for the shortcomings, at least you won't go backwards. Secondly, when you know that you don't have this capability, when you know your bodhisattva is not enough, then you don't jump off or put your head into the tight mouth, or else some causes and effects would reverse. You must remember, if you force yourself to do something when your bodhisattva is insufficient, it would be counter-effective, because it is the mind nature to determine causes and effects, not the precepts to determine causes and effects. Understand? When I finish my lecture, you would know how to distinguish it. So you need to remember, to do precepts will increase some good causes and effects. When you don't observe to do precepts, the consequences of your Dharma practice would be lesser achievement and slower pace. If not observing not to do precepts, meaning that you do something that you shouldn't do, you would have evil retributions. You don't keep to do precepts, you would only gain no benefits. But if you break not to do precepts, the result would be more serious. You must remember these two. One is called to do precepts, and the other is called not to do precepts. These would help you plant some causes. If you have planted the seeds, you would have some effects coming out to help yourself. If you don't plant and you have violation, you don't do any, or you have done something bad, you would have some other retributions. That is how to differentiate. So when you see clearly, you would know what mind nature to determine causes and effects is all about. The Buddhist teachings have illustrated 2 things. The first one is absolute, outer-worldly truth, which is about the nature of emptiness. It is about the most ultimate situation and truth. The second one is called a relative worldly truth. It is the law of causes and effects in the earthly world. Then you asked, our Dharma practice is to upgrade our mind nature to get close to the absolute outer worldly truth. so that I can liberate from the cycle of karmic existence to attain Buddhahood. If you teach me to set up criteria to handle matters, you're said to use wisdom to establish standards to deal with matters. That means to analyze the law of causes and effects very well, and also to add precepts to help me set up to these criteria. Does it mean that I've to put my focus all on the law of causes and effects? Then I wouldn't have absolute, outerworldly truth. Would it be difficult for me to become Buddha? Would I forever be trapped in this earthly world? Actually, as I said in the last lecture, you need to know that this absolute, outerworldly truth is the law operating in the Dharma realm, and the law of causes and effects is operating in the three realms, which refers to the world you are living in. The absolute, outerworldly truth is the Dharma nature, the nature of emptiness. Dharma nature and the nature of emptiness can only be applied in mind consciousness and Dharma realm. If you do something reckless and think that you would have no causes and effects, this is called without causes and effects, and this is wrong. This kind of Dharma practice is wrong, but some people might say that if you put too much focus on the law of causes and effects, you would neglect the absolute, outerworldly truth. Then how could I liberate myself from the cycle of karmic existence? And how could I narrow the gap between these two in my Dharma practice in the earthly world? This is the key point in our Dharma practice. I will talk about that in the future. Why? As I just said at the beginning, the first step for us to lay the foundation of mind training is to set up criteria for judgments and dealing with matters related to mind training. These standards need to meet three requirements before it can be called wisdom. Firstly, they must be applicable to everything in daily life. Secondly, they must comply with the precepts. Thirdly, they must integrate the relative worldly truth and absolute outerworldly truth with wisdom. Now I have talked about two of them. I haven't started on the third one today. I taught you to use the mind nature to determine causes and effects, and how to lay a foundation for mind training. With wisdom we need to set up a standard for insight, as I just taught. Doing this thing would result in this effects, and doing that thing will result in that effects. This is a kind of insight. This is how we use the law of causes and effects to distinguish right and wrong. So you need to remember, Dharma practitioners should normally choose precepts to coordinate with the law of causes and effects as your criteria for dealing with matters. But when and under what circumstances could there be precepts exception? And when and under what situation there can't be precepts exception? That should follow the law of causes and effects and bodhicitta. That means to add bodhicitta and use wisdom to make judgments. You need to be careful about whether you should have precepts exception or not, because when many Dharma practitioners learned about precepts exception and no precepts exception, they start to do things recklessly. After they do it, they use precepts exception as an excuse to forgive themselves. In fact, in the law of causes and effects, he still would get some bad karmic retributions and some good fruitions. The same goes to precepts exception. One would not avoid karmic retributions because of precept exception. You mustn't make a mistake, because it is not precept that determines causes and effects. It is mind nature that determines causes and effects. So no matter what Dharma rules you take as standard, this is how you think in your mind, but other people don't think this way. There would be causes and effects. From it you must understand that now, because we use mind nature to determine causes and effects, so if Dharma practitioners have any deviations in mind nature, they would be in the magnetic field of negative energy. You would be connected to the evil path, and you're linked to it. Especially when you die, you would instantly migrate from mind consciousness to the evil path. This is why we put so much emphasis on the training of mind nature. This is the natural feature of nature and is also a key point that all Vajrayana Buddhist practitioners have neglected. Especially nowadays, many Vajrayana Buddhist practitioners ignore causes and effects. This is what I teach you to see today. This is the law of causes and effects, which cannot be got rid of by superstitious power of blessing. All Rinpoches, even he has become Guru Master, he is still under the karmic force of causes and effects, even when you have become Buddha, like the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni who has attained Buddhahood. He is still under the karmic force of causes and effects. He must enter into the Dharma realm, where the operating rule is absolute, outer-worldly truth. With the Dharma nature existing there, he can then be free from the control of the law of causes and effects. So in fact, there would always be causes and effects. It doesn't mean that after you have learnt certain methods, you can then go against the law of causes and effects. Because of that, Vajrayana Buddhism puts great emphasis on the quality of mind, but nowadays, Vajrayana Buddhism is taught by some people who don't put emphasis on the quality of mind, which is really dangerous. If you don't have premium quality of mind, you can't learn, or the Guru Masters can't transmit and teach those Dharma practices centered on mental strength to their disciples. In order to ensure that Guru Masters who transmit and teach Dharma would abide by this rule, Vajrayana Buddhism requires that Guru Masters who transmit and teach Dharma must possess the lineage qualifications given by their Guru Masters with lineage, and authorize them to transmit and teach Dharma. Then they can be regarded as qualified Guru Masters to transmit and teach Dharma. He must focus on precepts. Guru Master for transmission of Dharma who possesses the lineage qualification. After he is willing to take in disciples who trust him, he still needs to observe disciples for 6 years or more, because in nature, it is the mind nature that determines causes and effects. If you just randomly teach him some formula on visualizations and the mental strength operation, he would die even faster. So we need to observe disciples for 6 years or more before we could teach him some Dharma practice methods mainly on mental strength, so as not to accelerate his death. If he has not yet reached the first step in mind training, he hasn't set up the criteria to judge right and wrong, and use wisdom to deal with matters, as I just talked about. If you have tested him on his views on causes and effects or criteria, just like I asked you to raise hands if you haven't tested that, if you don't precisely know how your disciple would think, you can't transmit such Dharma methods to him. In total there are 12 years altogether. He observe you for 6 years and you observe him for another 6 years. In total there are 12 years. During these 12 years, the task of Guru Master for transmission of Dharma is to adjust and train the quality of disciples' minds. That is why I said today that I want to adjust the quality of your mind, and hope that your standard will be elevated. It is a pity that nowadays there are so many people who are eager for quick success and get instant benefits. It is the same case in seeking Dharma and in practicing Dharma. Even people who give and teach Dharma are like that. So very often they, for the sake of quick gain on Dharma methods, skills and blessings, they would blindly ask for Guru Masters to give them empowerments, facilitating many unscrupulous Guru Master who don't care about precepts. Some Guru Masters who, for the sake of making a living and without any virtue, like to show off about their having many Dharma methods. Also some so-called Guru Masters with lineage for transmission of Dharma who enjoy having power would casually transmit empowerments, and even provide many of them. They make no effort to train the disciples' qualities of minds. Such act equals to violating the precepts, which means that you don't do what you should do. Instead you do everything that you shouldn't do. The outcome would be for the Guru Masters with lineage for transmission of Dharma to become also fake Guru Masters. They would lead a group of people with greed and ignorance, full of anger in heart and arrogance, to enter the door to hell. together. So, Green Tara is well aware of the rule that mind-nature determines causes and effects. She already said that, if Guru Master has good lineage, but your Guru Master has poor foundation in Buddhist Dharma, he can't even explain how the mind-nature determines causes and effects, and his character is bad. It means that his Dharma of mind is very bad as well. Their deities or Dharma protectors in the lineage system would not recognize him. If you follow him, you would enter into his terrible magnetic field, causing the same effect. You are unable to connect with deities or Dharma protectors in the system for their help. Therefore, Green Tara told us you must carefully seek Guru Master, who can teach you how to cope with problems at life and difficulties after death. A qualified Guru Master must focus very much on the training of precepts, mind training, nature of emptiness and light. You need to dedicate to your Guru Master to maintain a pure samaya, meaning to trust each other. You also need to focus more on Guru Master's level of Buddhist Dharma and teaching ability, that is to say, how he teaches you mind training. Now I only teach you the first step. There are many more on mind training. Real blessing is Guru Master's practical teachings given to disciples so that the Buddhist Dharma can be planted in the disciples' mind, and to induce their own potential abilities to help themselves. If the Guru Master only knows about ceremonial rituals and talks a lot on superstition, brags about his abilities on Dharma practice, but does not know how to explain in depth and real Buddhist Dharma, the Guru Master would lead his disciples to fall down together for rebirths in terrible places. Green Tara also said that Dharma practices which only focus on various kinds of deities, empowerment and ceremonial rituals, rely on objects for blessing, and Dharma instruments, but neglect the practical and appropriate Dharma practices for remedy. Unfocused Dharma practices that do not even have the basic mental concentration are doomed to fail. So you need to remember not to be misled and enticed by all the external looks of ceremonies or affected by the big title of a Guru Master, thinking that Dharma practice is only an easy and simple thing, and look for a Guru Master carelessly and come to realize the mistakes after death. Then everything will be too late. So Green Tara told us that other than having the basic mental concentration, you still need other strengths in Dharma practice and coping methods, precepts, meditation power and wisdom. I have talked a lot on precepts, although I didn't explain in detail what each precept is about, but I've given you a general idea of what it is. Now I start teaching you how to set up to these criteria only. Meditation has not been taught. Actually, I have repeatedly said that precepts and wisdom are the cornerstone of any Dharma practice. Not any one of them can be left out. This is the traction of the karmic force, the trial you will face in the future, because you are still in this earthly world, so you would have to face it in the end. I have talked about that in the first lecture. That is, can you ensure that your Dharma practice is useful and works? The second lecture, what is the relationship between your destiny and Sahadeva? The third lecture, how to avoid the post-death trial and the abstruseness of the Pure Land. The fourth lecture, the method to deduce future destiny. The fifth lecture, the high degree of risks and danger in the post-death world. The sixth lecture, how do characteristic inclinations of karmic retributions and current choices influence one's destiny? The seventh lecture, how to make the spirits of deceased let go their attachment to greed. The eighth lecture, the impact of one's attachment to anger and hatred in afterlife. The ninth lecture, the frequently encountered problems on being trapped after death. The 10th lecture, after death dangers triggered by ignorance. The 11th lecture, as proven that life still continues to exist after death, what dangers would be encountered. The 12th lecture, why we need to fight for the dominance of mind in the spiritual realm. The 13th lecture, what are the disintegration parts in the post-death world? The 14th lecture, what are the dangers of non-religious spiritual training practices? The 15th lecture, the relationship of danger, opportunity, and mind-nature in Dharma practice, and the 16th lecture today, which is the beginning of the mind training episode, that is, how to use wisdom to set up the foundation of mind training.